This is where the triad of Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan lies. It is a region full of activity, though often for the wrong reasons. Here, communal life is broken, international borders are breached daily, and both militants and militaries carry out secret operations, each looking for the next power grab. In recent years, the region has become even more violent and unstable, exceeding its usual turmoil. Reciprocal skirmishes now make it one of the world's most dangerous areas. In January, Balochi insurgents launched attacks across borders into Iran and Pakistan. The Iranian Air Force responded by bombing covert groups within Pakistan, prompting Pakistan to strike hostile camps in Iran. Later in March, Pakistan's Air Force targeted Taliban units in Afghanistan in retaliation for an earlier assault. Meanwhile, a different Taliban unit had hit Iranian positions near the border a year prior. More recently, in October, separatists attacked Karachi airport, killing Chinese engineers. The list goes on, but these incidents show just how intertwined insurgency and local grievances have become. The 2024 Global Security Index now ranks Pakistan as the fourth most affected by militancy, Afghanistan at 6th, and Iran at 26th. Here, nationalists, jihadists, militants, and governments all fight for supremacy, but things are getting worse with each attack. The triad is now slowly merging into a single battle space, and borders have become like chalk lines. Bold today, smudged tomorrow. This region also has the distinct honor of being one of the most unfriendly places for women. The Taliban has recently tightened its morality laws, banning women from hearing each other. Pretty insane stuff. However, as horrible as this is, I believe it is essential to access local sources to stay informed about how the region is doing and where it's going. That's why I asked Ground News to sponsor this video. Meanwhile, in Iran, a female student was detained for protesting the strict dress code. She stripped to her underwear in demonstration. Some 250 articles were published on this, with an even distribution between the right, center, and left. No articles from Iran though, which should come as no surprise. With everything that is happening around the world, stories on women's rights will simply drown in the background noise. So I appreciate that Ground News picks up on these stories. Their blind spot page also surfaces these kinds of interesting items that go under the radar of all other outlets. Go to ground.news/Caspian to learn more or scan the QR code on the screen. Subscribing gets you 50% off the Vantage plan as a limited time offer. That's what I use. Your subscription will also help support our channel and make more content possible, so I recommend you check it out. The link is below. Underneath the contemporary boundaries of Central Asia lies the ghost of Khorasan, echoing the memories of ancient empires. Once a rich cultural and political center, Khorasan was ruled by various Turkic and Iranian monarchs, each vying for dominance. Yet, the seat of power shifted so often that no unified authority ever developed. As a result, Khorasan became Asia's version of the Wild West. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Khorasan became a battleground for the Russian and British empires, which sought to take up defensible positions. The Russians advanced from the northern steppes, while the British came up from the south. What followed was a period of intense geopolitical conflict that gradually eroded Khorasan's shared identity. Caught in the crossfire was the young Afghan state. Both Russia and Britain sought to control it. After years of back and forth hostility, a peace treaty was signed in 1893 that turned Afghanistan into a British client state. The peace treaty, crafted by Henry Durand, established the border between British India and Afghanistan by drawing a line straight across the map, which he named after himself. Durand sat in his office and simply calculated how far British infantry could fire from their westernmost posts and marked the line accordingly. No consideration was given to geography, history, or even existing realities on the ground. Nonetheless, the Durand Line was signed and imposed on the region. For the locals, however, the agreement was a disaster. It cut straight through ethnic communities that had existed together for centuries. The Pashtun people were particularly affected as the new border divided their towns and cities. Pashtuns were the rulers of Afghanistan, and while many Pashtun areas remained in Afghanistan, many more were left outside of it. This included Peshawar, the city of pearls. For Pashtuns, losing Peshawar felt like losing an arm or a leg. It was a reality they could not accept. Even now, a century later, successive Afghan governments have continued rejecting the Durand Line. Adding to the tension, nearly 3 times as many Pashtuns live in Pakistan than in Afghanistan. Not surprisingly, this fuels strong irredentist feelings in Kabul, which is why Afghanistan claims Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan regions. If an Afghan government were ever able to unite the Pashtun people into a single political entity, Pashtun dominance in Afghanistan, which currently accounts for about 40% of the population, would grow stronger. Moreover, Afghan control over sparsely populated Balochistan would give it access to the world's oceans. These two goals, becoming an ethnic majority and escaping landlocked isolation, could then serve as the foundation for a modern, centralized Afghan state. This vision for nation building has been shared by all Afghan governments, old and new. That includes the Taliban. Emerging from the wake of the Soviet Union's war in Afghanistan, the Taliban ruled the country from 1996 to 2001 following a civil war, and once again since 2021 after the American withdrawal. Although the Taliban avoid openly presenting themselves as strict Pashtun nationalists, their origins and beliefs are deeply rooted in Pashtun culture. Like past Afghan governments, the Taliban strongly opposes the Durand Line, so much so that it draws strength from it. For example, the Pakistani Taliban, which is different from the Afghan Taliban, exists solely to undo Pakistan's control over Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the region that is home to Peshawar city and where the Pashtuns make up the majority. Islamabad designated the Pakistani Taliban a terrorist group in 2008, leading to fierce fighting between the two. Since then, thousands have been killed. The Pakistani Taliban has carried out attacks on schools, taken hostages, bombed mosques, and more. However, these clashes make for an unusual conflict. Islamabad and the Afghan Taliban have historically had close ties, but this relationship has cooled as the Afghan Taliban shares a deeper bond with the Pakistani Taliban. Even so, much of the hostility unfolds along the Durand Line, with the Pakistani Taliban carrying out attacks, kidnappings, and all the other things expected from extremists. Meanwhile, Pakistan responds with drone and missile strikes, but must carefully avoid targeting the Afghan Taliban. So, yeah, an unusual conflict. To make matters worse, in 2015, ISIS Khorasan, or ISIS-K for short, emerged as one of the militant groups thriving from the turmoil. Although it has global ambitions, ISIS-K has mostly focused on fighting Kabul, not Islamabad, since it doesn't consider Pakistan to be part of historic Khorasan. Either way, with the Taliban back in control of Kabul, old wounds have reopened and new ones have appeared. In their pursuit of dominance, Taliban leaders have now allied with several Balochi sectarian groups. The Balochis have a lot in common with the Pashtuns. They too are a divided people. Most live in Pakistan, where, despite numbering in the millions, they make up less than 4% of the population. As such, there is a sense of marginalization within the Balochi community, and many feel that their cultural identity is under threat. This feeling of vulnerability extends to the Iranian side as well. Unlike the majority Shia Iranians, Balochis are mostly Sunni. Because of these differences in language and religion, Balochis are Iran's most alienated ethnic group and thus the most inclined towards separatism. And Balochi separatist groups are plenty. There is the Balochistan Liberation Front, BLF for short. It was formed in 1964 and has roots in the anti-colonial and nationalist movements of that era. There is also the Baloch Liberation Army, or BLA for short. This one was formed in the year 2000 as an offshoot of the BLF. However, unlike its parent group, the BLA rejects the political process and advocates solely for military action. Both the BLF and BLA primarily operate within Pakistan. Over in Iran, meanwhile, there is Jaish al-Adl, a jihadist unit with similar goals. It was formed in 2012 and is believed to be funded by Saudi Arabia and the United States. In recent years, all three Balochi separatist groups have acquired American weapons and equipment from the Taliban. That new firepower has led to deadlier attacks than ever. In Pakistan, Balochi groups have targeted buses, trains, and bridges. In the first 10 months of 2024, there were 624 deaths and nearly as many injuries. August was especially deadly, with 254 people killed in 1 month alone. Balochi militants are also particularly hostile to Chinese interests. In March, 5 Chinese engineers were killed, followed by an attack on a Chinese facility. Later, a blast near Karachi airport killed 2 more Chinese engineers. Things have been tense on the Iranian side too. Last year, 11 Iranian police officers were killed near the city of Rask. In response, Tehran launched missile and drone strikes into Pakistani territory, which led to civilian casualties. Of course, Islamabad had to set the record straight and responded with airstrikes into Iran, resulting in 9 deaths. All the same, the Balochi militants aim to create an independent state from parts of Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Arguably, it's short-sighted of the Taliban to ally with the Balochi groups, given their conflicting territorial claims. However, the prevailing belief is that they would cross that bridge after stripping away territories from Iran and Pakistan. For now though, by joining forces with the Balochi militias, the Taliban are making a play for Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan regions, but without saying as much. One of the main sources of turmoil in this region is the availability of resources, or lack thereof. The water conflict between Iran and Afghanistan is a prime example of this struggle. As a country with towering peaks, most of Afghanistan's water flows from the Hindu Kush, which stretches across its northern and central regions. These glacial mountains feed the country's hydroelectric dams and produce hundreds of megawatts of electricity. However, these dams also limit access to an already scarce water supply, creating severe impacts for downstream Iran. Take the Helmand River as an example. It's one of the largest rivers in the region, flowing from Afghanistan all the way up to the Hamoon Lakes by the border with Iran. Who controls what, where, and how much of it is hotly contested. Both Afghans and Iranians are ready to die for it, and some already have. Attempts to formalize water rights have all failed. The closest thing to a binding agreement is the 1973 Helmand Water Treaty. It forms the basis of bilateral water policy. According to the treaty, Iran can draw 22 cubic meters of water from the river per second, with an option to buy another 4 cubic meters per second in years of normal rainfall. However, since the treaty was never ratified, enforcement relies on good faith, something in as short supply as the water itself. Political unrest in both nations has not helped either. Events like the 1973 Afghan coup, the 1979 Iranian Revolution, the Soviet-Afghan War, the US-led occupation, and the rise and fall and rise of the Taliban have all disrupted regional projects. As a result, long-term infrastructure planning has been inconsistent, with local geography paying the price. A comparison of 1998 and 2019 satellite photos of the Hamoon Lakes makes it easy to see how such water scarcity can fuel conflict. Over the years, skirmishes have flared up periodically. In 1998, tensions escalated to the point where Iran gathered nearly 200,000 troops on the Afghan border, poised to launch an attack. And even though Iran ultimately backed down, the incident showed just how easily disputes over water rights could spiral into full-scale conflict. Even now, tensions persist. For instance, in May 2023, deadly clashes broke out between Afghan and Iranian guards near the Hamoon Lakes. 3 were killed, and each side blamed the other for starting the fight. Arguing who began what misses the larger point. What matters is that the borders of Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan are devolving, each at its own pace and setting. Islamabad, Tehran, and Kabul have each failed to keep a lid on the ethnic, nationalist, and ideological forces at play. Gradually, the region from Pakistan's northwest to Iran's southeast to Afghanistan's south is merging into a single battle space. Human trafficking, drug smuggling, jihadist fighters, fringe militias, and separatist factions are all blending into a massive, self-destructive security crisis that eats its own. This triad may already be the most dangerous place on Earth, but an even greater threat looms if the situation continues to escalate. The remote factions could find ways to draw the national governments of Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan into direct state-on-state conflict. Some of the most devastating armed conflicts in world history were triggered by small powers. It's called the Proxy provocation theory. It explains how smaller powers can manipulate or influence larger ones into conflict by creating situations that compel the larger powers to respond in ways that serve the smaller powers' interests. If things keep going, luck and reason will eventually run out and regional conflict will take place. And once the storm rolls in, it will be too late to run for the hills. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. If you approve of what we do, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and mayhaps share the video. In any case, thank you for your time, and sağ olun.